In this module, you'll be learning about guidance and nurturing children's social emotional development. The guidance approach, we're going to talk about how the foundation of guiding young children's behavior and emotions, the foundation is really nurturing relationships. So children need to know that you care about them, and you need to build a relationship with each child in your care as well as their families. The goal of a guidance approach is to teach children about handling strong emotions, conflict, and things like that. So a lot of times we overlook the need to teach children how to get along, how to behave appropriately, and how to manage their emotions. And yet in other areas and domains, we explicitly teach math skills and reading and so on. And so really, this is so important that we teach children how to get along, how to handle their emotions, all those social emotional skills. We need to really set aside time to teach those and give children opportunities to practice them. The best way for children to practice them is during play with children and adults. It's so important to have developmentally appropriate expectations. Children's behavior is not going to look like we want it to look if we have inappropriate expectations, such as requiring preschool or kindergarten children to sit still and quietly for long periods of time. A lot of us, when we grew up, we experienced more punishment than guidance. So here is a table of some of the differences of traditional punishment versus guidance. And when I talk about guidance, I use guidance and the word discipline interchangeably as meaning pretty much the same thing, but very different than punishment. So for guidance, it's based on love. It is, we love you, we have a relationship with you, and we want you to be successful in the classroom with your friends, and so on. Whereas punishment is based on fear. So there's threats, there's physical punishment, and that is trying to get the child to behave based on fear. A guidance approach leads to assertiveness. So again, we're teaching children how to behave. And so, if you watch any of Dr. Becky Bailey's videos on YouTube, which I highly recommend, she says, when someone says, Mrs. Croker, he did this or she did this, then the first thing you can say is, did you like it? If not, the child should speak up for him or herself and say, I don't like it when you, whatever it is that they're doing. And children learn self-control in the guidance approach, whereas with the punishment, it's an external control. So again, it's based on fear. The child is doing what they think you want them to do so that they don't get spanked or yelled at or whatever the punishment might be. A guidance approach, when we're guiding them and helping them to make good choices, it's done with the child. So we talk about sometimes you have a little trouble standing in line waiting for lunch. So when you go to lunch, what will that look like? Where will your hands be? What will your body be doing while you're standing in line? And so it helps children with problem-solving skills. It's such a great opportunity when children are having a conflict during play, either over a material or what they're going to play or whatever it may be. That's a great opportunity for the teacher to step in and help them work through that conflict and solve that problem. And then as time goes on, gradually let the children do more and more of that conflict resolution. And a guidance approach typically results in positive self-esteem, whereas punishment results in self-doubt. Developing rules and consequences in your classroom is a very important part of teaching social emotional development and a guidance approach. It is a great idea to develop classroom rules with the children. I've done this with preschoolers, and typically they come up with the same kind of rules that I would have listed in the classroom. But when they're part of that process, then they're much more willing to obey the rule because they're the ones that said it should be a rule in the first place. It's also important to tell children what to do and not and what not, instead of what not to do. So, for example, if you don't want children to run in the classroom, if you say don't run, they're going to visualize running in their mind. And that's what you don't want them to do. So instead say use walking feet in the classroom. And then natural and logical consequences are really the best way to deal with behaviors that are unacceptable in the classroom. So a natural consequence would be something that the adult does not actually have to do anything. A natural consequence is something that just happens. So if a child brings a show and tell item and you say, okay, show and tell's over, put it back in your cubby, and the child takes the toy out again and it gets lost or broken, that would be a natural consequence. Another natural consequence would be, oh, you spilled some water here at the art area. Let's wipe that up so you don't slip and fall. And then if the child refuses to help and then they fall down in the water that's spilled on the floor, that would be another natural consequence. A logical consequence is something that the adult does implement, but it is directly tied to the behavior. So again, that cleaning up the water that was spilled. If the child doesn't slip and fall, but if they actually say, okay, and again, the adult can help the child, but they're learning that if this happens, then this should happen. It's logical, it's tied to the behavior. So, you tell them we're not going to spray water over here, and then they do, the logical consequence would be, okay, let's get some paper towels and wipe this up. If a child gets angry and knocks over another child's block building, a logical consequence would be, wow, look, you made Danny very sad when you knocked his blocks over. Do you think we could help him rebuild it? Okay, and something I do like to say when resolving conflicts is, how can we make him feel better, and let the child kind of think through that. But a logical consequence would be helping him rebuild that. All behavior with young children is communication. So it's important to think about, what is the behavior telling us? Why is a child acting that way? And one of my favorite quotes is that children who need love the most will ask for it in the most unloving ways. So when you have a misbehavior in the classroom, again, think about what triggered that behavior. There's a lot of triggers with young children, and my most current experience is with my own children. And so a lot of times when they get grouchy or they're fighting, it's something simple like, okay, you're ready for lunch, you're hungry, or you need a little rest time, you're kind of tired. And so think through what could be the trigger for that behavior. And remember that all children really need our love, and that for every negative thing you say to a child or redirection, they need 3 to 5 positive interactions with you. I have had some very difficult children in my teaching experience, and there's always something good about the child. No matter how challenging their behaviors, there's always something that you can recognize and a way to have a positive interaction. And we always say that children are trying to get attention, which is somewhat true, but they really need a connection with caring adults and with other children. All humans are wired for connection, so that is a need just as much as being fed and cared for in other ways. With encouragement and acknowledgement, it's important to be specific and to recognize children's effort. So if we use praise, sometimes we just say, great job, and the child doesn't necessarily know what they did well. So if you're specific, if you say, I really like the way you helped your classmate clean up when he spilled that bin of toys, and you can recognize their effort. So instead of saying, I really like your picture, which we do a lot, and I've done as well, but that makes it about you and you're judging their work. But instead, it's great to say, wow, you worked really hard on that. You should be proud of yourself. So that's just one example of how to use encouragement and acknowledgement in the classroom. Again, social emotional development is so important, and we need to provide opportunities to practice it, and they need some direct teaching. Role play is a great way to help children with their social emotional development, using puppets, telling stories about social emotional development. And again, it's important to remember that social and emotional development, all of these learning domains, the physical, language, cognitive, they are all very closely tied together. So we can talk about them separately, but they're very interconnected. So the social emotional domain is very closely connected to the language domain. If a child is unable to use their language to ask for a turn, then they might act out and aggressively and hit the child instead, or try to pull the toy out of the other child's hands. So we need to think about how those domains are related and how we can help children acquire the skills they need for successful social interactions.